Hey guys, tonight we begin our journey somewhere warm. Very warm, in fact. The kind of heat that clings to your skin before the sun even rises. You wake up lying on a reed mat inside a humble mud brick home on the banks of the Nile. The walls are sun-baked, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of dried dates. You yawn, stretch and realize your teeth feel like they've been scrubbed with gravel. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where dental hygiene wasn't just a luxury, it was a survival tactic. You roll over, reach for a small stone dish near your bedding, and dip your finger into a gritty grey powder. It smells faintly of crushed flowers and bone. You rub it across your teeth, trying to scrape off the film of sand you've inhaled while sleeping. Because yes, when you live in a desert and sleep with open windows and no air filter, you're basically seasoning your lungs and molars with fine dust every single night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing bedtime around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You live in a place where sand is not only part of the ground, it's in your bread, in your clothes, in your hair, and, tragically, in your toothpaste. Well, what passed for toothpaste? For ancient Egyptians, oral hygiene was surprisingly important. You're in a culture obsessed with appearance and purification. This is a world where people bathe twice a day if they can, where priests shave their entire bodies every 3 days for purity, and where smelling bad is a moral failing. So, when your teeth feel like a lizard walked through them during the night, you're expected to fix it. But dental care in ancient Egypt wasn't just about vanity, it was about survival. The constant chewing of coarse bread made from stone-ground flour, and we do mean stone literally, meant that bits of quartz and grit snuck their way into every bite. Over time, this wasn't just unpleasant, it wore down enamel like a belt sander. Everyone, from the pharaoh's butler to the pyramid brick hauler, suffered from dental attrition. Imagine smiling and realizing your teeth are flat as tiny dinner plates. Now here's the weird part. Despite how much they brushed and rinsed, tooth decay still ran rampant. How? That's the mystery historians still argue about. Was it diet, their funky toothpaste, maybe the sugary dates and beer, or just inevitable, given the lack of floss and dental x-rays? Meanwhile, records from tombs and wall carvings show that people genuinely cared about keeping their mouths clean. You'd see tiny tools tucked into grave goods, next to makeup jars and combs. It wasn't all ceremonial either. Archaeological finds reveal actual wear on these tools, like they were genuinely used daily, not just tossed in for burial vibes. But don't get too cozy with the idea of ancient hygiene. You still live in a world where people brush their teeth with a powder made from burnt ox hooves, crushed eggshells and ashes. There's no Colgate here, no whitening strips, no minty swish at the end, just rough powder and your own patience. You rinse your mouth with a quick gulp of warm Nile water, more on that delicious decision later, and spit into a bowl you share with the rest of your household. It's less about freshness and more about function. You don't want those rotting molars by age 30. There's also social pressure. Your friends would definitely comment if your breath smelled like yesterday's fish stew, and Egyptian society didn't pull punches when it came to public shaming. One papyrus even includes a love letter, where the guy complains his partner's breath smells like a fish market. Sweet. And before we move on, here's a fun fringe fact. Some believe Egyptians even used ground-up seashells in their toothpaste. Not verified, but plausible. Historians still debate the origin of a strange iridescent residue found in some dental powders. Could be shells, could be ancient glitter. We may never know. So, you've brushed, rinsed, and made your teeth marginally less horrifying. The sun is rising over the palm groves, casting that dreamy pink glow across the river. You feel ready to face the day, or at least chew something without crying. But the question still lingers. Why sand? Why ash? Why eggshells? And what happens when the brushing isn't enough? Let's find out. You move to the small courtyard outside your home, where morning light glints off the worn stone mortar your family uses to prepare, well, everything. Grains, spices, toothpaste. You squat beside it, your fingers tracing the powdery residue clinging to the edges. Inside, your mother is mixing today's dental blend. And trust me, you're not going to like what's going in. Crushed ox hooves, burnt eggshells, a dash of myrrh, if you're lucky, maybe even pumice stone, if your uncle remembered to bring some from the market last week. You already know what it feels like someone poured sandpaper into your mouth and asked you to smile politely. But this was considered cutting-edge stuff. Egyptians were innovators. Their toothpaste was one of the earliest recorded, thousands of years before modern chemistry blessed us with fluoride and peppermint. Back then, gritty powders were meant to scrub, not soothe. They believed the more it hurt, the better it must be working. Kind of like CrossFit, but for your gums. And here's the historical gem. One surviving Egyptian manuscript, possibly from the Ebers Papyrus, lists a dental powder recipe with astonishing precision. It called for rock salt, mint, dried iris flower, and pepper. Sounds nice, right? Don't be fooled. That pepper didn't freshen. It burned. You'd be spitting fire before you ever tasted breakfast. Still, it's not totally bonkers. Modern dentists admit the abrasives did help remove plaque and food debris. Iris has mild antibacterial properties. Even ash contains trace alkali, which may have helped neutralize mouth acid. But historians still argue whether this painful paste did more good than harm, especially since ancient teeth show more damage than healing. You stare into your family's blend, watching your mother pinch in a final ingredient, powdered charcoal from last night's fire. It's the same charcoal used to line her eyes as coal. Beauty and hygiene weren't so far apart in this world. And again, weirdly ahead of their time. Charcoal toothpastes have made a full-on comeback in recent years. Your ancestors were trendsetters, or masochists. Hard to say. As the paste thickens with water into a black grainy sludge, your younger brother scoops up a dab and smears it across his front teeth with a finger. You follow suit, resisting the urge to wince. It's salty. Bitter. A little crunchy, if we're being honest. You chew on it slowly, letting the grit work between your molars. Then you realize this isn't brushing, it's exfoliating your entire mouth. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some believe ancient Egyptians occasionally added crushed gemstones to their pastes. Possibly for status, possibly for abrasiveness, possibly just because they were rich and bored. No one agrees whether this really happened, but flakes of lapis lazuli have been found embedded in some funerary mouth relics. Whether that's vanity, ritual, or just a bad idea, we'll let you decide. The process was communal too. Families shared toothpaste bowls. No squeezing your own stripe of gel in peace. No toothbrush caps. No bubblegum flavour options. Just the same dusty finger pot, passed around every morning, probably between sips of sour beer and bites of flatbread. Oh, and toothbrushes? Those hadn't quite arrived yet. Instead, you had chew sticks. Frayed twigs from specific trees like the Salvadora persica were stripped of bark and gnawed until the fibres softened. Then you'd rub them back and forth across your teeth. It worked surprisingly well. Even today, chew sticks are still used in parts of Africa and the Middle East, and studies have shown they rival the effectiveness of regular brushes. But we'll get to those in a moment. Right now, you're still spitting out your charcoal paste into a dry patch of earth. Your tongue feels like it's been sandblasted. Your teeth squeak when you run your finger across them, which is either a good sign or a tragic one. You stretch again, looking out across your neighbourhood. People are emerging from their homes, many still rubbing their teeth with fingers or twigs. Hygiene here is a public ritual, and the Egyptians took it seriously, not just for looks, but as a marker of discipline, purity, and health. Priests especially had to brush multiple times per day to be ritually clean. Can you imagine brushing with this nightmare paste 3 times before lunch? And yet, tooth decay still found a way in. Even back then, ancient medical texts included references to tooth worms, tiny creatures people believed caused decay. They described them as living inside cavities, nibbling away from within. Of course, we now know this is nonsense. But think about it. If you lived in a time with no microscopes, no bacteria knowledge, and a chunk of your molar just crumbled away one morning, wouldn't you assume something was chewing on it? Scholars still argue about how widespread that belief was in Egypt specifically. Toothworms are clearly documented in Mesopotamian cultures, and similar ideas show up later in Greco-Roman medicine. But were the Egyptians true believers, or just medically metaphorical? The debate remains open. You finish your ritual, lips slightly numb, and glance toward the small temple complex in the distance. You know who's waiting there. The next phase of your dental adventure isn't about powders or pastes, it's about people, professionals, sort of. Because even in ancient Egypt, you didn't face a truly bad toothache alone. You went to the dentist. You walk slowly toward the temple district, past the open-air market where the smell of fried onions and yesterday's fish mingle in a way that makes you question your own breakfast decisions. But your jaw is aching today, dull, throbbing, like something alive has taken up residence in your back molar. Time to visit the dentist, or at least the closest thing ancient Egypt had to one. Now, don't expect a bright room with reclining chairs and muzak. You step into a shaded chamber within a temple compound, where the scent of incense hangs thick in the air and the floor is cool stone. A priest greets you, not in a white coat but linen robes, shaved head, and the faintest smear of coal under each eye. And yes, this is your dentist. Sort of. In ancient Egypt, medicine and religion were deeply entwined. Many medical professionals were priests and many temples housed small infirmaries. Dentistry, surprisingly, had its own specialist title, Airi Swunbupuru, translated loosely as the one who cares for teeth. And here's the kicker. We even know the name of one such figure, Hesi-Ra, a court official during the 3rd dynasty. His tomb inscription describes him as Great One of the Dentists of the Palace, which basically makes him history's first documented dental professional. So now, here you are, sitting on a carved stone bench, squinting into the shadows while your priest-dentist pokes at your mouth with what looks suspiciously like a fishbone. Sterile? Not even slightly. Effective? You'll see. He hums softly, eyes narrowed, and pulls out a bronze tool, flat, slightly curved, sharp at one end. This might be used to scrape, or dig, or gulp, extract. You lean back. You reconsider. But it's too late. His hands are steady, his expression unreadable. And remember, no Novocaine, no numbing gel, no distraction from the pain except maybe biting your own tongue and pretending you're floating down the Nile. Sometimes extractions were the only option. Decay got too deep, abscesses swelled, and the best solution was to yank the offending tooth. And yes, there's evidence they did this. Ancient skulls show healed sockets, meaning someone pulled a tooth while the patient lived. It's enough to make you clench your jaw just thinking about it. What's fascinating is that the priest doesn't only treat the physical. He murmurs a few words in ancient Egyptian, drawing on incantations meant to drive out evil spirits, especially if the toothache was believed to be caused by a curse or malevolent force. And why not? If you don't understand germs, evil spirits seem like a reasonable explanation. You glance at a small shelf behind him. There are papyri rolled up tight, some of which contain recipes for toothache poultices. One reads, "Grind cumin, onion and incense. Apply to the tooth. Recite the spell, fall, O worm, fall." Which honestly sounds like something you'd find on a wellness blog today. Just missing the essential oils. And while most dental treatments were simple, pastes, rinses, sometimes lancing infected gums, there were attempts at repair. Archaeologists have found teeth bound together with gold wire. Some speculate these were early forms of bridges or splints. Others think they were post-mortem, just for show in the afterlife. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians genuinely attempted restorations during life, or if all dental craft was symbolic and ceremonial. Meanwhile, your own treatment continues. The priest presses a wad of soaked linen against your sore gum. It smells of honey and crushed herbs, maybe coriander, with something sour underneath. Wine, perhaps, or fermented fig juice, both used as mild antiseptics. You're not sure it helps, but at least it tastes better than the charcoal paste. Then comes the fringe moment. He ties a reed band around your forehead. At first you think it's for pressure, but no. He drops a small amulet into the band, right above your brow. It's a carved tooth, shaped from carnelian or faience, meant to ward off pain. The belief that tooth pain could be scared away if it thought it had already been replaced. Yes, the decoy tooth theory. Ancient Egyptian logic. Clever, slightly nuts, and weirdly charming. The procedure wraps up with a quiet chant. The priest waves a burning sprig of papyrus over your head for cleansing, and hands you a small jar of thick, dark paste to apply at home. You nod politely, bow, and retreat back into the sun, mouth still aching, but at least you've done your part. And maybe, just maybe, the pain will subside, or the spell will work. Or at worst, you've got a good story for your neighbours. You pass by a few others on your walk home. One's holding her cheek. Another is sucking on a lemon soaked in frankincense, yet another folk remedy. Some swear by garlic juice, others crush lotus seeds. The truth is, there was no standard cure. Ancient Egyptian dental care was a bizarre blend of herbal science, sacred ritual, and a whole lot of hope. Still, the next time someone complains about flossing, you can gently remind them. At least they're not getting prodded by a priest with a fishbone. By the time you return home, the sun is high and the courtyard hums with quiet work. Grinding flour, weaving linen, preparing bread. You're still sucking thoughtfully on your tongue, feeling the ghost of the bronze tool where your sore molar used to be. The ache has dulled to a pulsing throb, which, in ancient Egyptian terms, probably means it was a good appointment. You settle near the hearth, watching your cousin prepare the family's rinse water. It's not just any rinse, it's mouthwash, ancient style, and no. It doesn't come in a swanky glass bottle with crisp Alpine mint branding. This one's handmade, and let's just say the flavour profile is bold. First, she pours in a splash of beer. Yes, really. Not just for drinking. Beer was used for rinsing the mouth. It was everywhere. Cheap, common, and teeming with fermented properties that ironically may have offered some light antiseptic value. Egyptians didn't necessarily know why it worked, but they knew it felt better than plain water, which was often suspect in terms of cleanliness. She adds a few drops of myrrh resin, scooped from a small lump that smells like smoky honey and melted candles. Myrrh was considered sacred, healing, and pleasantly pungent. Add to that a crushed mint leaf, and you've got yourself a rinse that could almost pass as boutique, if it weren't for the next ingredient. Goat urine. No, don't spit out your tea. It wasn't always goat urine, but some recipes suggest the use of animal urine in hygiene and medicine. Scholars argue whether this was widespread or ceremonial, and, thankfully, there's no definitive evidence that goat pee mouthwash was a daily habit. But it did exist in the ancient medical canon, and, well, there's always that one neighbour who swears by something strange. In your case, the rinse today is beer, myrrh, mint, and maybe a hint of pomegranate rind. You swish it around your mouth, the warmth soaking into your freshly scraped gums. It burns a little, but so did that pepper paste this morning. At this point, you're used to oral care feeling like a dare. You spit into a clay basin and glance over at your grandmother. She grins, revealing teeth worn down like sea glass, smooth, flattened, and mostly intact, despite being twice your age. "Chew on this," she says, handing you a twig with frayed fibres at the end. Ah, yes, the chew stick. It's a piece of soft wood, likely from a Salvadora persica tree or something similar. Known today as the toothbrush tree, it's been used for thousands of years across Africa and the Middle East. In fact, even today, miswak sticks are recommended by some dentists for their antibacterial properties. The frayed end acts like a brush, scrubbing away food particles while releasing natural antiseptics. You bite down and chew until the fibers soften, then drag it gently across your teeth. The taste is earthy, a little bitter, but refreshing after the metallic tang of bronze tools. No plastic, no bristles, no paste. Just the slow, thoughtful scrape of wood against enamel. It's effective too. Studies show these sticks reduce plaque, gum inflammation and bad breath. Of course, the Egyptians didn't have double-blind studies. They just had generations of observation. You see someone live to 80 with most of their teeth, and you take notes. Now, here's your quirky fringe detail. Chew sticks weren't only for the living. Mummies have been found with them tucked among burial goods. Alongside combs, eyeliner and perfume cones, they included tools for maintaining a perfect smile in the afterlife. Because apparently, even Ra preferred you didn't show up with morning breath. As you continue brushing with your twig, your uncle appears with a clay jar. He opens it, revealing a thick green gel made from aloe, frankincense, and a pinch of salt. This is tonight's gum balm, applied before sleep. It's cool to the touch and smells faintly medicinal, like something you'd rub on sore muscles, except it's for your mouth. Again, no one knows if it actually worked. Historians still argue whether these mixtures were effective medicine or just ritual comfort. But when you're nursing a sore jaw and you've still got barley to chew and dates to mash, a little aloe goes a long way. You pause, reflecting on the layers of care. There's a rhythm to it. The morning paste, the midday rinse, the evening balm. In a world without dentists on every corner, oral health became a daily act of devotion, part hygiene, part spirituality, part survival. And believe it or not, it wasn't seen as a burden. Egyptians took pride in cleanliness. To them, smelling good, looking clean, and having healthy teeth weren't luxuries. They were signs of being in balance with Ma'at, the cosmic order. Even your smile played a role in holding the universe together. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you chew your twigs slowly, smear on your aloe balm, and place your chew stick beside your sleeping mat like a sacred tool. Not because you're vain, but because in ancient Egypt, taking care of your teeth wasn't just self-care, it was cosmic maintenance. You're up before dawn again. The Nile breeze is cool on your face, but your gums still throb from yesterday's temple visit. You roll your jaw gently, no blood, which is promising, and squint toward the horizon where the river glows gold with sunrise. You're expected at the bakery today, but before you go, there's one more daily ritual. A second rinse, this one prepared by your neighbour, who swears by his secret ingredient. You join him at his small stall beside the granary. He's old, wiry, with a smile that somehow reveals every remaining tooth he owns. He holds out a small ceramic cup, and you sniff. It smells sharp, fermented, a little smoky. Boiled date pits, he says proudly, crushed and soaked in vinegar. You tip the cup. It tastes like a wine goblet lost a bar fight. But it's not the worst thing you've rinsed with this week. While you're swishing, he launches into a story, how back in his youth he'd suffered a rotting molar so painful he'd smashed it out himself with a stone pestle. He swears by the date vinegar rinse now. You nod, not entirely convinced, but too polite to object with cheeks full of sour liquid. The thing is, stories like his aren't rare. In fact, oral traditions in ancient Egypt often carried more medical wisdom than written texts. People passed down remedies, tricks, and hard-earned lessons about what worked, and what absolutely did not. You could learn just as much from your grandmother's memories as from a temple scroll. Still, scholars today marvel and argue over what counts as legitimate dental care versus folk experimentation. The line blurs fast when your pharmacist is also your cousin and your clinic is a shaded corner of your courtyard. You swallow the last trace of rinse, probably not advised even then, and head off toward the bakery wondering how much sand you'll ingest before lunch. The answer, unfortunately, is a lot. You see, in ancient Egypt, bread was both a blessing and a curse. It fed the masses, it symbolized prosperity, and it quietly destroyed everyone's teeth. Here's why. Egyptians milled their flour using stone grinders. As wheat was ground by hand between two rough slabs, tiny fragments of quartz, flint, and sand mixed in. The result? Loaves that sparkled ever so slightly in the sun. Beautiful, maybe. Digestible, sure. But kind to your enamel? Not a chance. By mid-morning, you're elbow deep in dough, and every need brings back the dull ache in your jaw. You chew a piece of leftover bread and immediately regret it. It's like gnawing on sandpaper. Your molars scream in protest, but there's no stopping. Bread must be made, and eaten, and suffered. You think back to the skeletons discovered by modern archaeologists. Mummies with jawbones worn nearly smooth. Teeth ground down into flat, brittle pegs. Even children's remains show signs of enamel erosion before adolescence. And this wasn't due to candy or poor brushing. It was the bread. One study of Egyptian skulls revealed near-universal dental abrasion across all social classes. Royals, scribes, peasants. Everyone was chewing the same flour-laced grit day after day. Even the elite couldn't escape it. Cleopatra herself probably had beautiful lips and terrible molars. Some tried to soften their bread with beer or honey. Others soaked it in milk or fig paste. But even then, the damage was done. The grit was everywhere, a silent assassin in every bite. So here's your fringe fact for today. Some tombs included offerings of bread without sand, baked from imported flour or specially sieved grain, reserved for the afterlife. The logic? Maybe the next world had better dentists, or at least cleaner flour. Historians still debate how aware the Egyptians were of the link between their bread and their dental woes. Did they see the connection, or just accept tooth decay as a fact of life? Some scrolls hinted advice to sieve flour or use finer grinders, but these were luxury techniques. Most people simply endured. Back at the bakery, you finish your work, face dusted with flour, tongue searching for new chips in your back teeth. By now, you know the cycle. Grit in the bread, pain in the molar, visit to the priest, rinse, repeat. And yet, there's pride in this. A resilience. You're part of a culture that built pyramids, mapped the stars, embalmed the dead, and still had time to fuss over daily oral care. Grit and all. You return home at sunset, pockets filled with barley crusts and fingers aching. You rinse one last time with warm beer and mint, chew on your miswak stick, and whisper a tiny prayer, not to the gods, but to your own teeth. Hold out one more day. You tell them, just until the next batch of paste. The night air in the village is cool and quiet, interrupted only by the soft creak of palm leaves and the distant call of water birds drifting along the Nile. You lie back on your woven mat, jaw finely calm, a faint peppermint sting still clinging to your gums from the last rinse. But sleep doesn't come just yet, not when you're still chewing over what you saw this morning. Because today, wrapped in a funerary cloth at the temple embalming house, a mummy's skull cracked open a silent, decaying truth. You'd only peeked at the body as it was being prepared, an older man, likely noble, his linen bandages freshly unwrapped. And there, in the dim torchlight, you saw his mouth. Every single tooth was a battlefield. The molars were shattered down to their roots. One incisor had a visible abscess, yellow, swollen, and sealed in by time. His jawbone had eroded near the back, leaving a gaping, infected hollow that must have hurt like betrayal. And this was someone wealthy, someone who likely had access to the best pastes, the freshest rinse herbs, maybe even a private priest-dentist with gold thread amulets and a brass toolkit. It didn't matter. Even the rich couldn't chew their way out of this mess. When modern scientists ran CT scans on mummies just like this one, they found widespread dental trauma. Abscesses, cavities, impacted molars, teeth worn down to stubs, like someone had taken a file to them every day for 30 years. And yet, no fillings, no caps, no prosthetics, just erosion, infection, and whatever magic or mashing could keep them going. Here's the kicker. No anesthesia. When pain became unbearable, the only option was pulling the tooth, or enduring. Some skulls even show holes where ancient dentists likely drained infected gums with primitive tools. Think Bronze Awl meets horror story, not recommended. Historians still argue how often extractions were performed during life versus post-mortem. Some scholars believe Egyptians attempted them only when the pain outweighed the risk. Others think those gory signs were more symbolic, prepping the body for a peaceful afterlife, toothache-free. Either way, you're not so sure your molar is worth saving now. It's hard to unsee what rot looks like, immortalized in linen. But the decay didn't stop people from smiling. Paintings from tomb walls show Egyptians laughing, dining, playing music, even kissing. They weren't shy about their teeth, even if many were crumbling. Smiling was still a gesture of beauty and warmth, even when it meant showing off some pretty gnarly dental real estate. In fact, bad breath was often a bigger social offense than missing teeth. Egyptians prized cleanliness, and halitosis could ruin your social standing. Some texts even contain romantic complaints. Her eyes are like lapis, but her breath like the stable. Ouch. So to fight it, they reached for sweet-smelling resins. Myrrh and frankincense were chewed like gum. Lotus petals might be tucked inside the cheek for a floral burst. And in fringe cases, garlic mashed with dates was thought to sweeten the mouth. Although honestly, that sounds like you're just swapping one problem for another. You turn onto your side and trace your finger across the soft wood of your chew stick. It still smells faintly of mint and resin. You keep it by your sleeping mat, not just for convenience, but for protection. Because here's a little-known tradition. Some Egyptians believed that teeth carried the soul's memory. A tooth lost or broken without ceremony might weaken the spirit's integrity. So chew sticks weren't only for cleaning. They were talismans too. You didn't just care for your teeth, you honoured them. That's why, when bodies were embalmed, tooth care items were often buried with them. Archaeologists have found tongue scrapers, bronze dental probes, small jars of powdered paste, even miniature chew sticks. And these weren't symbolic miniatures, they showed signs of real use. Burnished edges, worn fibres, bite marks. Even in death, Egyptians expected to brush. So you lie there, wondering what will be placed beside your body one day. A paste jar? Your favourite rinse blend? A small twig that once soothed your sore gums after a long day in the bakery? You don't know. But you do know this. You'll wake tomorrow and brush again. Not because it's fun. Not because it's easy. But because it's part of being whole. Clean teeth, calm soul. That's the rhythm of life on the Nile. And tonight, as sleep creeps in, you whisper a thanks to the unknown hands that once wrote the spell, "Fall, O worm, fall." Maybe they were right. Maybe your ache is just a spirit trying to find its way out. You smile, faintly, painfully. The stars blink above, indifferent and beautiful. Morning again, you wake to the rhythmic sound of grain being ground just outside your door. A soft, grainy shh as 2 stone slabs press wheat into flour and, inevitably, tiny bits of stone into your future dental misery. But before breakfast, before bread, before the next onslaught of gritty chewing, there's the matter of your breath. You don't need a mirror. You can already feel it. Your mouth tastes like last night's fermented rinse, had an argument with a dead onion and lost. Time to fix that, ancient Egypt style. Today's solution: onions and honey. You scoop up a lump of honey from a clay jar, thick, golden, slightly crystallized, and roll it between your fingers. Then, from a basket of vegetables near the hearth, you grab a slice of raw onion. Yes, raw. You wrap the honey around it like a sweet bandage and pop it into your mouth. This isn't a snack. It's a treatment. Ancient Egyptians believed the antiseptic properties of honey combined with the volatile punch of onion could cleanse the breath, disinfect the mouth, and, if the smell didn't knock everyone else out first, restore social harmony. Whether it worked is a different matter. Historians still debate whether this odd combo was a breath freshener, a ritual offering, or simply a form of punishment that got misinterpreted as hygiene. But you chew and gag a little. It's sharp, sweet, and hits your sinuses like a sandstorm of regret. Your cousin walks past, catches a whiff, and gives you that universal look of, "I hope that's medicinal." Others had their own methods. Some chewed on frankincense or myrrh pellets throughout the day. These hardened resins acted like ancient gum, sweetening the breath, stimulating saliva, and occasionally sticking your molars together like nature's candy glue. For the elite, perfumed breath pastilles made from crushed flowers and spices were popular. Ground cinnamon, cardamom, and even iris root were pressed into small pellets and dried in the sun. If you were lucky enough to live near a temple with a well-stocked herb garden, you might even barter for a mint papyrus blend, rolled tight and sucked like a lozenge. But for the average villager, it was whatever you had. Honey, onion, maybe a dab of sycamore sap, or a fennel root to gnaw on. Here's your fringe fact for today. A rare scroll found in a noblewoman's tomb listed clove oil as a mouth treatment, centuries before it would become a global dental standard. Historians can't agree if the oil was extracted or just the cloves chewed raw, but either way, the discovery hints that someone somewhere in ancient Egypt had fresh breath that could rival a modern breath mint. You finish your fragrant honey onion med ball and rinse with a splash of beer. The burn is almost welcome now, like setting fire to your breath just to start over. You check your miswak stick, still damp from last night. You give it a few chews to fray the end again, then brush gently, paying extra attention to your sore back teeth. The pain has faded to a memory now, still there, but distant, like the ghost of a very small crocodile chewing softly in the shadows. And just when you think you're ready to face the day, you hear your uncle call from the courtyard. "Bring the toothpaste," he yells. Not toothpaste like we know it, but a small ceramic dish with a new batch of ground eggshell, ash, and dried mint. You carry it over carefully, noticing how the paste clings to the walls of the bowl like wet sand. Your uncle is preparing for temple service, which means he must be clean. Not just bodily, but orally. Priests brushed multiple times a day, not because their jobs were especially gross, but because purity was central to their role. No foul breath could rise in a prayer. No rotted tooth could utter the names of gods. It's said that priests shaved their entire bodies, including their heads and even eyebrows, every 3 days. They bathed several times a day. And yes, they brushed and rinsed just as often. Oral care in this world was more than health. It was a symbol of devotion. You couldn't enter a temple with a mouthful of rot and expect the gods to listen. So your uncle, bald and radiant in the morning light, dips a finger into the gritty paste and begins scrubbing his teeth. No mirror, no toothbrush, just instinct and experience. He winces once, maybe twice. His gums are red, raw from overuse. But he keeps going. You hand him the rinse, beer and mint again, and he swishes with the seriousness of a man preparing to whisper to the gods. And you realize, watching him, that in Egypt, oral care was also a kind of ritual, a cleansing, a preparation for speaking truth or prayer, or just dinner with dignity. So you brush again too, Because your smile isn't just yours. It belongs to your community, to your ancestors, to the long line of Egyptians who passed down their gritty powders and pungent rinses and told you, without a doubt, that clean teeth mattered, even if your breath still smells faintly of a roasted onion. Later that day, as the sun climbs high and unforgiving overhead, you find yourself in the courtyard of your cousin's home. She's just returned from a feast at one of the overseer's estates, a rare invitation, and she's smiling, though not just from the wine. "Guess what they served," she says, raising an eyebrow. "Date cakes, with honey, so much honey." You raise your own eyebrows, less from excitement and more from dental dread. Because while honey was considered sacred and medicinal, used in salves, embalming, and, as we've seen, even as a mouth treatment, it was also a cavity's best friend. Combined with soft date flesh, sticky fruit pastes and dried figs, the upper classes in Egypt indulged in far more sugar than their farming counterparts. It's a twist few expect. The richer you were, the worse your teeth often were. Archaeologists examining mummies from elite tombs have found appalling levels of decay, infection and abscesses, especially compared to the simpler grain-based diets of rural workers. Royal molars were riddled with black pits, sometimes worn all the way to the gum line. The privileged, it turns out, could afford the kind of food that rotted your smile. And they didn't just eat it occasionally. Ceremonial feasts involved heaping portions of honey-soaked bread, candied lotus seeds, and fermented date wine. All delicious, all disastrous. It's not hard to imagine a scribe nibbling on a honey cake while dictating medical papyri about toothache cures. You grin at your cousin and ask, "Was it worth it?" She shrugs, chews thoughtfully, then winces. "Only a little." There's a strange irony here. Gold was never used in teeth. Despite how often people assume the ancient world filled cavities with bling, Egyptian dental remains show no evidence of gold fillings, caps, or restorations. They had gold in abundance, used it for everything from toe caps to coffin linings, but not for their teeth. And yet the rotted royal smiles were common. Some pharaohs were found with only a few teeth left in their jaws. Others had signs of prolonged abscess infections, even reaching into the sinuses or jawbone. The very people entombed with piles of treasure couldn't preserve the treasure in their mouths. Historians still debate whether this neglect was due to lack of technique or lack of priority. Did they want to fix teeth and just couldn't? Or did they accept tooth loss as natural and unavoidable, a cost of indulgence? You help your cousin prepare her evening balm, a blend of frankincense resin, clove, and goose fat. Yes, goose fat. It was believed to soothe inflammation, and while the science may be lacking, the coolness of the salve does feel nice. She smears it along her gum line, eyes watering slightly, then settles back on her mat with a resigned sigh. "We should have been poor," she says. You laugh. The poor had less food, yes, but they also had fewer cavities. Their coarse bread, while abrasive, didn't feed bacteria the way sugar did. No sticky dates, no honey glazes, just grit, grain, and the occasional sour beer rinse. Of course, they weren't smiling all the time either. Many had teeth worn to the root by their 30s. Some were nearly toothless by 50. They chewed with their gums, mashed their food, or let it ferment into a slushy porridge. Tooth loss was common across classes. It just happened faster the more cake you ate. Still, there's a certain pride in knowing your mouth reflects your life. Each missing molar, a sign you lived long enough to lose it. Each worn incisor, a badge of hard labour. Each aching jaw, a reminder that you are, if nothing else, still alive, still chewing, still brushing. And here's your fringe fact. In some burial sites, people were interred with false teeth carved from ivory or wood, not attached, not functional, but placed next to the skull, as if offering what was lost in life for the afterlife ahead. It's still debated whether these were meant to be spiritual restorations, symbolic offerings, or just part of the burial artistry. But either way, someone thought teeth mattered, even beyond death. You return home with your cousin and rinse one more time for the day, this time with a mild solution of fig leaf extract and warm water, a gentler mix for a day already filled with sugar and soreness. As you spit and smile into the firelight, you wonder if maybe, just maybe, future generations will find your teeth one day and marvel at them. Not because they were perfect, but because you cared, because you brushed, because you kept showing up, chew stick in hand, ready to face another day of figs, grit, and the eternal battle between humans and their molars. And if you're really lucky, maybe you'll be buried with a tiny jar of that goose-fat balm. You wake the next morning to the smell of firewood and something less pleasant. Crocodile dung. No, seriously. You wrinkle your nose as your older sister mixes a paste near the doorway, the smoky scent mingling with something distinctly swampy. She notices your look and grins. Don't be soft. It's for beauty. And yes, today we're crossing into the weird and wonderful territory where hygiene meets cosmetics in ancient Egypt. Because brushing your teeth wasn't always just about health, sometimes it was about aesthetic, and sometimes crocodile dung made the guest list. Your sister is preparing a blend of powdered natron, charcoal and, you guessed it, dung, to whiten her teeth before the solstice festival. She insists the formula came from a temple servant who used it to impress a priest. You're unconvinced, but also too tired to argue. Here's the thing. While this isn't exactly mainstream practice, Egyptians weren't strangers to mixing the sacred with the strange. Natron, naturally occurring sodium carbonate, was widely used in embalming and cleaning. It dried, deodorized, and sterilized. So using it in oral care made a weird kind of sense. But the dung, that's where things get fuzzy. Historians still argue over the extent to which crocodile dung was used in cosmetics or hygiene. Some sources suggest it was employed as a contraceptive, others as part of magical rituals for fertility or protection. But whether it made its way into dental routines as a whitening agent, a breath freshener, or just a desperate flex before a party is still debated. What is true, however, is that the Egyptians placed immense value on the appearance of the mouth. A clean smile wasn't just nice, it was symbolic of purity, refinement, and readiness to engage in society. If your mouth was foul, people assumed your mind was too, and don't even think about reciting sacred texts with rotted gums. That's practically blasphemous. So, as strange as it sounds, your sister is dead serious about her dung paste. She applies it carefully with a slender reed, brushing her teeth in long, slow strokes. She spits into the dirt, rinses with fig wine, and smiles. Her teeth look slightly darker than before, but maybe that's part of the magic. Meanwhile, your neighbour is using crushed pearls in her morning paste. Not because she's wealthy, she's actually a weaver, but because she believes the shine will transfer to her teeth. It's not a common belief, but in a culture as symbolically rich as Egypt, it's hardly the weirdest. You ask her if it works. She shrugs. I got a marriage proposal last week, she says. Maybe it's the teeth. And then there's the perfume merchant 2 streets over, who swears by a daily rubbing of cinnamon bark and rose oil across his gums. It leaves the breath sweet, he claims, and the gods pleased. He's missing 3 teeth, but he smells divine. Here's your fringe discovery of the day. In the tomb of a high priestess, archaeologists found a small gold dental tool, ornately carved with lotus motifs. Whether it was ceremonial, decorative, or actually used is unknown, but its presence suggests that dental tools could be objects of prestige. A shiny mouth. Good. A shiny tool to clean it with, even better. By midday, you're out helping gather palm leaves for weaving, and the heat is nearly unbearable. You chew on a twig of sweet acacia, not for cleanliness this time, but for moisture and scent. It's a multi-purpose tool. Brush, gum soother, even light breath freshener. You keep one tucked in your belt like a pen. You overhear two elders arguing about the best tooth whitening technique. One swears by salt and vinegar. The other insists on powdered oxbone mixed with crushed poppy seeds. The trick, he says, tapping his stained front tooth, is to leave it on your teeth all night. You'll dream in colour. The other scoffs. You'll wake up toothless. It's all part of the ongoing balancing act between oral health and vanity, between ritual and practicality. Egyptians didn't separate these things. A clean mouth was a sign of inner and outer harmony, and if that meant a little dung or bone or fish glue, so be it. Later that evening, you sit around the communal fire with your miswak stick, brushing slowly as stories are shared. A young man talks about visiting the temple of Thoth and seeing a scribe with teeth as bright as moonlight. A woman beside him claims she once dated a man with such clean teeth he never had to speak, just smile. And someone else laughs, saying, then he smiled too wide and one fell out. You all laugh gently. Everyone's lost a tooth or two. But that doesn't stop you from brushing. It's part of the rhythm, the discipline, the belief that a well-kept mouth is a mark of being truly alive. You finish brushing. Your sister smiles at you with her possibly whiter, possibly more dung-touched teeth. And you smile back, because here, that's what people do, even when their mouths are full of the weirdest stuff on earth. The next morning, you bite into a barley cake and immediately regret it. The left side of your jaw twinges sharply, a deep, stabbing pain that sends a ripple of heat up to your temple. Not again. You chew on the other side and pretend you didn't just flinch. But you know the truth. Your toothache is back, and this time it means business. The strange thing is, you've done everything right. You've brushed twice a day, rinsed with every bitter foamy herbal solution under the sun, chewed more twigs than a goat in spring. And yet, here it is, a relentless reminder that tooth pain was inevitable in ancient Egypt. So you do what your great-uncle used to do. You reach for the papyrus roll stashed inside a woven case near your mat. It's frayed at the corners and smells faintly of dried lotus. The writing is faded but legible, a list of dental treatments passed down through the family. A blend of folk magic and trial-and-error medicine, carefully copied from older papyri that may have been copied from even older scrolls no one remembers. You scan the lines for something bold and underlined. There it is. For pain of the tooth, take cumin, onion, and incense. Grind. Pack around the tooth. Repeat the following words. The spell follows in a string of ancient script that translates loosely to fall, O worm, fall. Leave this mouth, return to earth. You blink. Toothworm again. See, for centuries, the toothworm theory was the dominant explanation for cavities and toothaches across many ancient cultures, from Mesopotamia to India to Europe. The idea was simple. A tiny worm burrowed into your teeth and feasted on them from within. Sometimes it slept, sometimes it squirmed, but when it woke up, boy, did you know. The theory wasn't entirely unreasonable, considering that decay left blackened holes and abscesses occasionally oozed. What else could be living in there? Egyptians may or may not have bought into the idea fully, but papyri like yours suggest some influence from the concept. The incantations to banish pain were usually tied to a physical treatment, herbal paste, salt rinse, sometimes even hot compresses applied to the cheek until the abscess drained. Modern scholars still debate whether Egyptians truly believed in literal worms, or if worm was just a poetic metaphor for the creeping nature of decay. Maybe it was both. In a time before microbes and molars on X-ray, language blurred the line between myth and medicine. You gather the ingredients listed: cumin seeds, a bit of raw onion, a pebble-sized piece of dried frankincense resin, and crush them together in a small mortar. The smell is overwhelming, spicy, sharp, smoky. You smear the paste on a strip of linen and gently press it along your gums. The relief is not immediate, but the act feels comforting, familiar, like you're participating in a ritual older than memory. You even mumble the spell, feeling a little silly and a little hopeful. Fall, oh worm, fall. Meanwhile, your cousin walks in, sees you pressing spice paste into your mouth, and nods solemnly. Don't forget the spell, he says. If you forget the words, the worm goes deeper. You roll your eyes, but repeat the chant anyway, twice for safety. Later that afternoon, the pain fades slightly. Maybe it's the cumin, maybe it's placebo, maybe the imaginary worm just needed some boundaries. Whatever the case, you tuck the paste jar into your satchel and carry on with your day, a little lopsided but functional. As you move through the market, you start noticing it more. The quiet, shared language of toothache, people pressing their jaws, traders rubbing at swollen cheeks, a young girl whispering to her mother that it hurts when she chews dates, a scribe at his booth chewing absently on a stick of thyme. Tooth pain wasn't rare, it was universal, and while everyone had their own cure, few had relief that lasted. You stop by a small stall where an old woman sells herbal bundles wrapped in linen. She offers you a packet labelled with a crude drawing of a molar. Wild mustard, acacia bark, bit of willow, she says. Boil it, swish it, spit it. Don't swallow unless you want dreams. You hand her 2 copper shards and take the bundle. Later, you'll boil it, let it cool, and dare your tongue to trust again. And here's your fringe fact for today. Some scholars believe ancient Egyptians used opium poppy extracts for severe pain, including dental. Though rarely mentioned in dental context directly, traces of the poppy plant have been found among temple gardens and medical jars. It's possible they brewed mild sedatives for everything from childbirth to bad molars. Still, for most people, the best cure was the one you could make yourself, recite over yourself, and hope the gods, or at least the worms, heard you. As the sun sets, you chew your miswak stick slowly, let the cumin paste sit on your aching gum, and mutter your 3rd spell of the day under your breath. Fall, worm, fall. The next day you're summoned to the weaver's house. Not for fabric, but because her nephew, a scrawny boy with a mischievous grin and a wail like a wounded falcon, has a raging toothache. His cheek is swollen, his eyes half shut, and his breath smells like someone buried a garlic clove in a clay jar for 3 weeks. You're not a healer, but you've seen enough cracked molars and cumin poultices lately that your neighbours think you know teeth now. You kneel beside him with your satchel, pulling out the paste jar from yesterday. It's sticky, slightly fermented, and still smells like grilled onions at a temple feast. The boy recoils. That smells cursed, he mutters. You nod sympathetically. That's how you know it's working. You apply the paste gently, speaking the toothworm spell as you do. His mother, hovering behind you, presses a tiny amulet into your hand. Put this under his pillow, she whispers, for protection. It's a small carving, roughly the shape of a tooth, made of faience, that turquoise-glazed ceramic the Egyptians loved. These amulets weren't just for show. They were believed to ward off mouth demons, soothe pain, and even prevent future decay. Here's the thing. In ancient Egypt, tooth health wasn't only physical, it was spiritual. There are papyri filled with magical incantations specifically aimed at dental problems. They instructed patients to whisper sacred words over herbal brews, to chant while chewing willow bark, to sleep with charms sewn into their hair or worn around their necks. It wasn't superstition, it was belief in harmony. A bad tooth didn't mean you skipped brushing. It might mean your soul was out of alignment, your heart unbalanced, or a spirit had lodged itself in your molar for lack of a better vacation home. So they turned to magic, and those magics were weirdly practical too. Some spells required ingredients like goat fat applied to the jaw to draw out heat, date pit ash rubbed on the gum for soothing bitterness, ink from the eye of Horus amulet mixed with honey and smeared on teeth as protection. You glance back at the boy. He's chewing on a miswak stick now, finally distracted. His pain isn't gone, but his breathing has slowed. That's progress. While the family prepares dinner, you poke through a bundle of scrolls the weaver's husband keeps for useful remedies. One is a scrap of tattered linen with an incantation inked in red ochre, calling on the god Bess, a dwarf-like deity associated with protection, music, and keeping away evil spirits, especially those responsible for disease. Bess wasn't part of the formal pantheon of great sun gods and sky gods. He was a household god, intimate, beloved, slightly goofy, and he hated seeing people in pain. Many Egyptians kept Bess statues near their beds, hoping he'd protect them from nighttime aches, including those miserable molar monsters. You start noticing how many houses have small carvings of smiling Bess tucked into nooks. His squat form, wide face, tongue out. A god with teeth, showing teeth, it makes sense. The scholars who study these household rituals still debate how much people believe the gods cured dental problems versus how much they hoped they would. Was the ritual the medicine, or was it just the comfort? Either way, you wrap the boy's amulet in a clean cloth, place it beneath his head, and offer his mother a fresh bundle of herbs to boil, mint, thyme, and licorice root. As you leave, she thanks you like you performed a miracle. You didn't. You just showed up with some plants and a half-dead paste jar. But that's the magic, isn't it? On your walk home, you pass a Scrabble school. A group of students is reciting lines from a hymnal, their voices echoing off the mud brick walls. You hear it clearly. Let the tongue be clean as the Nile. Let the mouth be sweet as a lotus blossom. You smile. Even here in the schools, oral purity was poeticized. Because in Egypt, a clean mouth wasn't just about food or pain. It was about speech, about truth, about being heard by the gods and by your community. Which brings us to a peculiar burial tradition. In some tombs, the deceased was laid to rest with a tooth-shaped charm placed on the tongue. A token for Osiris, perhaps, or a way to ensure they could speak clearly in the afterlife. My mouth is pure, one funerary spell reads. My lips speak truth. My teeth are clean as silver. Historians aren't sure how widespread this practice was. Some believe it was reserved for priests. Others think it was a kind of magical insurance policy, just in case your soul needed to argue its case at the final judgment. Back at your own home, you reapply a clove and honey balm to your jaw. The pain is returning slowly, like a tide creeping in. But tonight, you light a candle for Bess, just in case, and before bed, you whisper the words once more, not because you think there's a worm in your tooth, but because someone long ago believed it helped, and that belief lingers like a comforting hum under the stars. Fall, O worm, fall. You wake to an unfamiliar quiet, no grinding stones, no hawkers shouting, no siblings arguing over rinse jars, just the soft rustle of linen as you sit up and notice. Your tooth doesn't hurt. You prod at your jaw with cautious disbelief. No swelling. No sharp jolt when you bite your tongue just to check. You wait for the catch, for the ache to pulse back like an angry drumbeat. But it doesn't come. It's a good day in ancient Egypt, which is just as well because you're due for your quarter moon checkup. Not a medical appointment per se, but a habit passed down in your family. Every quarter moon, your grandmother gathers the children and elders for what she calls the gum inspection. It's less clinical, more communal, and definitely not optional. You gather in the courtyard with a bowl of warm Nutron water, a bundle of chew sticks, and one of your cousin's weirder inventions, a bronze mirror polished so aggressively it could double as a signal to passing gods. You take turns peering into your own mouths, squinting at molars in the bronze like they hold your fortune. The youngest cousin claims to see a tiny black demon in her back tooth. Everyone gasps. You lean over to check. Yep, just a stubborn bit of pomegranate skin. But the older aunties are already murmuring about how that's exactly how mouth demons start. Someone brings out a scroll, tattered but detailed, with an old inspection checklist. Gums pink and firm. No loose teeth. No foul breath during morning chant. Able to chew dry barley without weeping? You pass most of the list. Your cousin does not. She's sent off to chew licorice root and reconsider her life choices. This kind of informal group health monitoring wasn't unique. There's archaeological evidence that familial or communal dental routines were part of village life. Small ceramic basins with tooth care residues have been found at the centre of shared homes. Tooth powders were prepared in batches. Rinses were poured from communal pots. There were no solo dental routines. If your gums were bleeding, everyone knew. It's also the perfect excuse for storytelling. Your grandmother begins with her favourite tale, how the gods created teeth. According to her, the god Pitar carved the first teeth from white alabaster and placed them in Horus's mouth so he could eat the stars. You know, this isn't in any official temple scroll, but no one interrupts. Because stories like this live outside the formal canon, they're passed on through cracked smiles and half-lost memory. Oral hygiene, you see, is as much oral tradition as it is medical. Later, your grandfather tells his own version of the legend, where teeth came from the bones of defeated demons and were gifted to humans by Sekhmet, the lioness goddess, so they could devour their enemies with style. You like his version better. There's more roaring. Here's today's quirky gem. Some funerary masks depict the deceased with perfect symmetrical teeth, even when their skulls underneath are a mess of gaps and craters. It wasn't just vanity. It was belief that your afterlife body would be whole, clean, unbroken. Your soul would have every tooth, every strand of hair, every memory. Historians still debate whether such representations were aspirational or purely symbolic. Were they lying to the gods with artistic dentistry, or showing what they believed was the truth of who they were inside? The inspection ends with a small ceremony, not a ritual in the religious sense, just a family tradition. Everyone rinses one last time with warm beer and fig sap, chews their twigs and thanks the gods, and bears for another week of mostly functioning mouths. You sit by the river after, watching dragonflies skim the water's surface. Your miswak stick dangles from your mouth like a lazy smile. You're not just brushing, you're reflecting on how a culture so ancient cared so deeply for something so modern: clean teeth, fresh breath, shared routines. You remember the phrase from the temple mural near the scribe's hall, "A pure mouth speaks no lies." It wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about truth. The state of your mouth reflected the state of your spirit. Rot meant corruption. Sweet breath meant balance. Even today, your uncle says a good day starts with a clean tongue and ends with a quiet jaw. He's not wrong. As dusk creeps in and the heat fades, you feel a kind of peace settle behind your molars. No ache, no spells, just the quiet satisfaction of teeth that have survived another day of sand, sugar, and superstition. And tomorrow, you'll brush again, not because your teeth demand it, but because your ancestors expect it. By midday, you're back at the temple, this time not for pain, but for curiosity. The head scribe has agreed to show you one of the old medical papyri tucked away in the archives. You stand quietly under a high, shadowed colonnade, while a servant carefully unrolls the scroll across a stone table, its faded ink still legible after centuries of oil lamps and desert air. This one's a gem, a medical treatise on dental ailments. The scribe clears his throat, reverent. "Papyrus Rind," he says, "or possibly a copy of it." He traces a finger over one section, mumbling the translation aloud. "If the tooth is worm-eaten, apply ground sycamore honey and onion. Repeat thrice. On the third day, the pain will leave." You smile. That spell again. But what catches your attention is not the recipe. It's the illustration beside it. A sketch of a man, mouth open wide, with what appears to be a tooth, tied with a string to a heavy stone. The caption simply reads, "For when the pain speaks louder than the gods." You and the scribe exchange a glance. Would they actually do that, you ask? He shrugs, amused. Historians still argue. Some believe it was a symbolic drawing, representing the idea of pulling the source of evil from the body. Others think it was literal. Tie the tooth to a stone, drop the stone off a ledge, and hope for the best. Ancient Egyptian dentistry was sometimes art, sometimes trauma, and sometimes both. You ask if they ever tried restorative work. Patches, splints, bridges. The scribe nods and unrolls another section. This one shows a diagram of teeth bound together with gold wire, a practice once thought to be myth, until archaeologists found it on actual remains. No fillings, no crowns, but definitely intent. Someone, somewhere, wanted to hold a mouth together just a little longer. Here's the fringe detail of the day. A burial in Giza revealed a skull with 2 molars lashed together with linen thread, coated in a resin paste. Whether it was done before death or as part of mummification, no one agrees. But it speaks to the same ancient instinct: preserve, protect, prolong. As you leave the scribe's quarters, you're handed a small clay token carved with the eye of Horus, a parting gift. For protection, he says, if your teeth should rebel again. You nod solemnly. You've seen what rebellion looks like. Back at home, your neighbour's daughter is trying to make her own dental powder from dried lotus root, salt, and what looks suspiciously like chalk scraped from the side of a well. She insists it worked for a priest she met at the boat festival. Her brothers are less convinced, laughing as she scrubs her gums with a brush made from bundled reeds. You're painting your mouth, one teases, but the attempt is genuine, because Egyptians, from priest to peasant, experimented constantly with ways to treat and prevent tooth decay. There wasn't a single national formula. Families had their own recipes. Villages passed down methods through gossip as much as science. One home might favour ash and garlic, another vinegar and tamarind. One grandfather swears by grinding snail shells. For strength, he says, though no one's sure if he means dental or moral. In this culture, oral care is folk science, refined across generations. Every house becomes its own dental lab, every kitchen its pharmacy. As the day winds down, you prep your own evening paste. This time, a mix of mint oil, natron, and a touch of red ochre for that pinkish shine your grandmother likes. You brush by firelight, counting the rhythm of strokes like prayer beads. Left, right, up, down, circle, spit. Your sister joins you with a wad of fig pulp and sea salt, applying it to a tender gum. She hums softly, the tune a lullaby about Maat, the goddess of balance and order. Which reminds you of something. In one funerary text, the soul stands before Maat, declaring its purity. Among the declarations, I have not spoken lies, I have not used foul speech, I have not let rot dwell in my mouth. That last one always makes you pause, because in Egypt, a clean mouth wasn't just physical, it was moral, it was spiritual. You rinse. The paste stings slightly, but not in a bad way. Your tongue feels smooth, your breath is tolerable, your soul, you like to think, is intact. And as you lie down under the stars once more, the wind from the Nile cooling your cheeks, you let yourself believe. Maybe the gods smile on clean mouths. Maybe the underworld judges listen just a little closer when your breath doesn't smell like old onions and resin. Maybe you've done enough for today. You spend the next morning with your grandfather. Partly for company, partly because you've noticed him rubbing his jaw more often lately. He insists he's fine, just sensitive to heat. But you know the signs. He chews slower, he winces when laughing. And his smile, once full and confident, now hides behind a hand. You sit with him by the granary, peeling fava beans and watching the sun climb. After a while, he admits it. One of his front teeth feels loose. Not painfully, just wobbly, like it's considering retirement. He doesn't want to go to the temple. They'll pull it, he says, and this one still has some stories left to tell. Instead, he shows you a trick from his youth. Bread, soot, and beeswax. He takes a scrap of yesterday's flatbread, holds it over a flame until it blackens, then grinds it into powder. He mixes it with softened wax from a honeycomb, rolls it into a small ball, and presses it gently into the gap near his tooth. It tightens the gum, he says, and tells the tooth it's still needed. You're sceptical, but watching him chew later that afternoon, with only minor flinching, you wonder if there's something to it. Maybe not medicinal, maybe just the act of care, the ritual, the message to the body. We're not giving up yet. This blend of practical and poetic is everywhere in Egyptian life. Dental discomfort wasn't just met with medicine, it was met with metaphor. If a tooth fell out, some believed it was a sign the person had lied. If a molar cracked during a meal, it could mean impending change, good or bad. Which is why, tucked inside many tombs, archaeologists have found small figurines shaped like teeth, often made of ivory or faience. These weren't decorations, they were restorations, offerings to complete what the body lost. In the afterlife, you'd be whole again, tooth, tongue, and all. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. Some experts argue these tooth figurines were amulets, meant to be worn or placed in the mouth during burial. Others think they were votive offerings, tiny dental prayers placed at shrines to request healing. The truth? Probably both. The Egyptians were nothing if not thorough in their rituals. That afternoon, you visit the village well and run into the old grainkeeper, who claims he's working on a poppy and henbane rinse. You ask if it helps. Only after the third cup, he says, eyes twinkling. Then he adds, but by then nothing hurts anyway. That's the other side of it. Pain management in Egypt was rarely just topical. It involved drinks, smokes, even mild opiates brewed in tiny doses. No formal anesthesia, but enough numbing agents to blur the edges of pain, especially for those who knew the right combinations. Even the pharaohs weren't exempt. One royal medical papyrus describes a recipe involving mandrake root and honey wine, meant to soften the pain in the head and mouth. Whether it was swallowed or swished is unclear, but either way, the goal was comfort, without unconsciousness. You ask your grandfather if he ever tried it. I did once, he says. Slept for a full day. Dreamed my teeth fell out and grew back in gold. You both laugh, even though you know it's unlikely. His teeth won't grow back. And eventually, the ache will come for him like it comes for everyone. But for now, the soot and wax patch is holding. His bite is steady. His stories still have their usual bite too. That night, after dinner, you sit outside and watch him floss, with a sliver of linen thread soaked in palm oil. It's a slow, careful process. He says the oil softens the plaque. You say the oil makes his breath smell like an old boot. He chuckles. It's not the breath you judge a man by, he says. It's whether he bothers to clean it. You chew your twig beside him, swishing your latest rinse, a mix of basil and willow bark, and glance at the stars. There's a rhythm to this life. Eat, rinse, brush, suffer, soothe, sleep, repeat. And somehow, in the middle of all that, you find pride. Not in perfect teeth, they're rare, but in persistence, in the daily devotion, in the shared advice passed between aching mouths and worried fingers, in the whispered spells, the ridiculous ingredients, the communal paste pots. You press your tongue against your own back molar, still sore, still there, and somehow still worth saving. By the end of the week, the village is buzzing with preparation for the harvest festival. Everywhere you go, someone is braiding palm leaves, painting their faces, or cooking something sweet enough to set your teeth on edge from across the square. You're excited, of course, but also bracing yourself, because with festival season comes a full-on sugar ambush. Honey-drenched fig cakes, pomegranate syrup, candied dates, barley sweets, all delicious, all deadly to enamel. You walk past a row of vendors laying out trays of desserts that shimmer like amber in the sun, and hear a phrase that could double as a dental warning. Don't bite unless you're ready to lose something. You take one anyway, because you're not a monk. The cake is sticky and rich. It glues itself between your molars like it's building a house. You chew slowly, carefully, then feel the dreaded click. Something shifted. You pause, Nothing broken? Probably. You pretend that's reassuring. Later that afternoon, your neighbour's son isn't so lucky. A sharp piece of candied nut snaps off the corner of his incisor. There's blood, there's panic, there's a scramble for the festival healer, a mid-ranking priest who doubles as the go-to man for last-minute medical emergencies involving overly enthusiastic snacking. You follow them out of curiosity and low-key concern for your own molars, and arrive just in time to see the priest applying a paste of crushed garlic and natron to the bleeding gum. This will kill the heat, he says, and remind the tooth who's in charge. You're not sure if that last part is literal or metaphorical. He follows it with a mouth rinse made from coriander and barley beer, then packs a wad of linen soaked in fig resin between the tooth and the cheek. Pain management and breath control all in one. The boy sobs for a while, then starts chewing on the other side. While this happens, the priest gives a small lecture about mouth balance, a phrase that sounds like it was lifted from temple philosophy, but actually refers to something very practical. Keep your mouth cool, your gums firm, and your food soft. Festive or not, you're handed a small talisman before you leave, a clay tooth with a hole in the middle, meant to be worn as a necklace. It protects against excess, the priest says. You nod solemnly, fully intending to eat another cake before sunset. This blend of caution and celebration was typical. The Egyptians didn't separate joy from consequence. Every treat came with a warning, every indulgence a plan for healing. People didn't avoid sweets, they prepared for them. And here's your fringe fact. Some Egyptians kept tooth scrolls just for festivals, quick reference papyri with spells, recipes, and rinse instructions specific to post-celebration dental damage. One such fragment discovered near Thebes even included the phrase, "If the cake is too sweet, the cure must be bitter." Scholars still argue whether these scrolls were common or reserved for scribes and clergy, but the idea that dental self-care escalated during holidays, universally agreed. Festivals meant dancing, singing, feasting, and flossing. Lots of it. Back at home, your grandmother is soaking dried mint leaves in a ceramic bowl. She adds black pepper, a pinch of salt, and a drop of goat milk, today's festival rinse. It smells like spiced regret, but she swears by it. Keeps the sugar from nesting, she says. You rinse, gag a little, and prepare for the evening parade. That night, as torches light the village and music rises like smoke, you find yourself smiling constantly. Not for photos, not for the gods, but just because you're happy. You chew, you laugh, you dance, and all the while your miswak stick stays tucked in your belt like a silent promise. Before bed, you keep your word. You brush, you rinse, you check your molars with one wary finger. Nothing new chipped, no demons awakened, no molars demanding to be banished. You tuck the clay-tooth talisman under your mat and lie back, full of cake and joy and a hint of garlic. Clean teeth, tired legs, calm heart. You sleep like someone who has, for today, won the battle between ancient sugar and ancient ritual. The festival ends, but the aftermath lingers, in your legs, in your ears, and especially in your gums, which feel like they've been personally insulted by every sticky treat in Egypt. You wake with a dull pressure along your upper jaw, the kind that whispers, "You overdid it, my friend." So today, it's back to basics. You head out early to the herbalist's stall. He's old, crabby, and smells permanently of thyme, but he knows his plants. When he sees you approaching, he doesn't ask what's wrong. He just hands you a bundle of acacia bark, a twist of dried mint, and a leaf of papyrus with a familiar scribble. Chew, rinse, rest. You nod your thanks and drop a few lentils on his scale. Tooth pain has a universal price. Back at home, you prep the bark. Acacia, used for everything from ink to medicine, contains natural astringents. When chewed, it firms the gums, tightens loose teeth, so they say, and gives your mouth a bitterness that overrides any lingering sweetness from last night's date cakes. As you chew, you wonder, how did Egyptians know all this? They didn't have microscopes, No lab coats, just observation, trial, and a long, long memory. If chewing bark made your teeth feel firmer, you told your neighbour. If garlic paste stopped pain, you told your sister. If a certain priest's rinse made your mouth smell like sandalwood instead of swamp, well, you told everyone. Egyptian dental care was built on this web of shared wisdom, passed through families, carved into tomb walls, copied by scribes, whispered by grandmothers. There were official texts, yes, but the real knowledge lived in kitchens, temples, and hands. You clean your teeth slowly with a new miswak stick, stripped fresh this morning. The fibres are crisp, almost crunchy, and the smell is strong, green and sharp like crushed herbs in summer. You brush each tooth, taking your time. Across the courtyard, your aunt is giving her toddler a miniature chew stick, just a few inches long. The child gnaws on it like a toy. It's adorable but also important. Children here learn oral hygiene early, almost as soon as they learn to walk. There are no cartoons to remind them, no toothpaste commercials, just imitation. You see your mother brush, you do it too. You watch your grandfather rinse, you copy him. It's less of a chore, more of a habit, a family rhythm. Historians have found child-sized chew sticks and rinsing bowls in family tombs, suggesting that dental care started young and didn't stop, even after death. Here's your quirky detail of the day. In one tomb near Saqqara, a small child was buried with 3 items: a reed doll, a chew stick, and a tiny jar labelled sweet breath. Whether it was a real paste or just symbolic, no one knows. But the message is clear. Cleanliness, even in childhood, was sacred, and so was speech. In Egyptian belief, a child's first words had power, and for words to be pure, the mouth had to be clean. That's why many rituals surrounding birth, naming, and even weaning included some element of mouth purification, rinses with milk, smudges of honey and nectarine, little blessings spoken over the tongue. You're still thinking about that when your cousin approaches, grinning. He's holding a papyrus tooth diagram, half a joke, half a guide. "Let's see who has the healthiest smile," he says. You both sit under the shade of the fig tree and take turns pointing to imaginary spots on the drawing. "Here," he says, tapping a molar. "This is the one I lost to festival nuts." You laugh. "And this," you say, "is the one haunted by that honey-wrapped onion." You end up trading care routines, comparing rinses, poking fun at each other's bad habits. It's silly, but also healing. Because in Egypt, dental care is social. It's not locked in a bathroom with a mirror. It happens in the courtyard, the temple, the fire circle. It's a shared experience. You help each other floss, literally and metaphorically. As the sun sets, you rinse with acacia water again. Your gums feel less sore now. The ache is fading, as aches always do, given time, attention, and a few sticks of bitter bark. You lie back, watching the stars wink through the palm fronds. Your mouth is clean. Your breath is tolerable. Your smile is your own. And somewhere in the silence you hear your grandmother's voice in memory repeating the old phrase, "A clean mouth is a quiet mind." Tonight you believe her. By now, your morning routine has become almost ceremonial. Not rushed, not mindless, deliberate. You wake with the sun, sit cross-legged on the clay floor, and unwrap your chew stick like a sacred tool. The fibrous end is slightly wilted from yesterday's use, so you trim it fresh with a shard of copper. One snip, a twist, then you press it gently between your teeth and begin. It's not glamorous, it's not always pleasant, but there's something meditative about the motion. Back and forth, gum line to tip. Your tongue moves unconsciously, checking for spots you missed. Your mind drifts, and soon it's not just a cleaning, it's a reset. This morning your cousin joins you, waving a tightly rolled scroll. "Come see," he says. It's from the archives, shows all the dental tools used in temple care. You follow him into the shade and he lays the papyrus out carefully. The illustrations are small but detailed, Nearly 20 instruments, each with a short description. A hooked bronze probe, likely used to scrape plaque. A flat-tipped scoop, possibly for mixing paste or extracting debris. A two-pronged implement labelled for softening the pain of the tooth's cry. You pause. That last one, it's poetic. A reminder that in ancient Egypt, even dental agony had a kind of drama to it. Pain wasn't just a nuisance. It was a conversation between the body and the soul, and it deserved to be treated with reverence. What's fascinating is that most of these tools resemble modern dental instruments. The materials are different, sure, bronze, reed, linen, but the function is strikingly familiar. Clean, apply, extract, soothe, the four ancient pillars of mouth care. Historians still debate how much Egyptians really understood about the inner workings of the mouth. There's no evidence they grasped tooth roots, nerves, or infection the way we do today. But they clearly knew something about maintenance. They built a toolkit. They wrote instructions. They passed it down. Here's a quirky nugget for today. One set of tooth tools found in a tomb near Luxor was stored in a folding wooden box with inlaid ebony and tiny labels beside each item. Whether it was ceremonial or practical, the craftsmanship suggests someone viewed oral care not just as necessity, but as art. Inspired, your cousin decides to make his own kit. You help him carve a small box from palm wood, lining it with soft linen. Inside he places a fresh chew stick, a thimble of mint charcoal powder, a tiny copper pick, blunted for safety, a miniature clay pot labelled for breath before speaking. It's part joke, part genuine. He ties it shut with a scrap of reed fibre and tucks it into his sash like an amulet. For when the pharaoh himself asks about my smile, he says. You laugh, but there's pride behind the joke, because having a clean mouth in Egypt isn't just about comfort, it's about readiness, to speak, to eat, to pray, to laugh. If your mouth is prepared, your day is prepared. That evening, while preparing dinner, your aunt cuts her finger on a copper bowl. Nothing serious, but the sight of blood makes your younger cousin panic. Will it hurt her teeth? He asks, eyes wide. You smile and shake your head, but your aunt chuckles. He thinks everything's connected now, she says. Gums, fingers, spirit. And honestly, he's not wrong. In Egyptian medicine, the body is a whole. A sore mouth might be tied to an angry heart. A bitter tongue could reflect sour dreams. That's why many remedies were multi-use. A rinse for the teeth might also cleanse the eyes. A paste for the gums might calm a headache. You think of the temples again. Of Hezirah, the ancient dentist scribe who wrote about balance as much as about decay. You wonder if he saw teeth as tiny pillars holding up the body's harmony. You brush again before bed. Same rhythm, same focus. But now you do something new. You tuck a small bundle of mint under your pillow. It's a quiet nod to old habits, old spells. If pain returns, you'll be ready. If dreams come, they'll smell sweet. And if the gods are listening tonight, as they surely are, they'll know one thing. Your mouth is clean. Your words are clear. Your smile is ready. The next morning begins with the sound of reed flutes drifting through the village. Someone's child is being named today, and the celebration starts early. You wash your face in cool water, stretch your arms, and reach for your chew stick. The mint bundle under your pillow worked. No pain, no dreams, just a soft, tingling memory of something clean and green. You chew slowly, savouring the peace. But today, something pulls your attention away from the routine. It's the naming ceremony. More specifically, the ritual the priest performs before the name is given. He steps forward, holding a small vessel, and tips a few drops of herbal rinse into the child's mouth. Then he says the name aloud, once in a whisper, once in full voice. The crowd repeats it, sealing the sound in the air. You've seen this before. But today, you notice something deeper. The child's mouth is purified before it speaks its first sacred word. In ancient Egypt, This wasn't just cute, it was crucial. The mouth was the bridge between the inner world and the outer one, and before crossing that bridge, it had to be clean. This belief shows up everywhere, in naming rites, in funerary rituals, even in love spells. The mouth was powerful and therefore dangerous if left untended. You could bless or curse with your tongue. You could charm a god or insult a spirit. So, you cleaned it, religiously. Later that day, you visit a friend who works in the scribe's workshop. He's copying sections of the Book of the Dead, carefully drawing glyphs and columns with soot ink on fresh papyrus. You glance down and notice something familiar. A spell for opening the mouth of the deceased. It's one of the most important rituals in all of Egyptian religion. Performed after mummification, it allowed the dead to speak, breathe, eat, and pray in the afterlife. Without it, their journey to eternity would stall. But what's striking isn't just the ceremony itself, it's the tools used, the ritual involved. A hooked blade, a spoon-shaped instrument, a short rod carved like a tongue depressor, and sometimes a chew stick. Yes, even in death the tools of daily oral care appeared again, transformed from hygiene instruments into keys to eternity. You ask the scribe why. He shrugs, still tracing glyphs. The gods won't listen to a dirty mouth, he says. They never have. And he's not wrong. Ancient Egyptian beliefs linked truth and purity so closely, the word ma'at could mean both. To speak truthfully, one had to be clean, of thought, of deed, of mouth. Here's your scholarly debate of the day. Some Egyptologists argue that the opening of the mouth was purely symbolic. Others believe it had medical roots, perhaps derived from real procedures meant to treat the dying, or even revive them. Did it evolve from an ancient CPR method? A dental extraction rite gone mythic? We don't know, but we know it mattered. That evening, as you help your family prepare a small altar for a household offering, your grandmother places a bowl of honey and salt on the edge, not for food, for the gods. It sweetens the house, she says, and sweetens the breath of those who live in it. You add a sprig of dried myrrh for good measure. As night falls, your father tells you a story passed down from his father, a tale of a man who tried to lie before the gods in the afterlife, but his tongue was blackened, his teeth loose, and when he opened his mouth only flies came out. The gods knew he was false. He was cast into silence forever. It's a gruesome tale, sure, but it served a purpose. In Egypt, your mouth was your proof of self. If it was neglected, your soul might be neglected too. You brush slowly that night, letting the chew stick do its work, not just on your teeth, but on your memory. You think of all the mouths you've seen, smiling, grimacing, chanting, broken, and you think of your own, and what it means to keep it well, because maybe, just maybe, a clean mouth is the first step toward a clear conscience. You rinse, you spit, you whisper to the dark, let my mouth speak truth, let my breath carry no shame. And the stars above you say nothing, but they shine a little brighter. It's the quietest part of the day, just before dawn when the birds are still thinking about waking, and the Nile drifts like ink in the dark. You sit by the edge of the water, legs crossed, a damp chew stick in hand. Today feels different. Not heavy, not light, just still. You're not here to clean your teeth exactly. You're here to reflect, because this morning your uncle is being buried. He wasn't young, but his passing still echoes through the house. He'd been the one who taught you how to mix your first rinse, the one who could tell by scent alone if you'd skipped brushing, who claimed your smile should be sharp enough to cut lies, but soft enough to comfort babies. And now he's silent, at least for now. You rise and make your way to the courtyard, where the preparations have begun. His body is wrapped carefully in linen, anointed with oils and surrounded by offerings. Food, tools, clothing, and right there, beside the comb and the mirror, sits a small clay pot, It's labelled, "For his teeth." You blink. Inside is a perfectly carved chew stick, wrapped in linen and tied with a ribbon of gold thread. Next to it, a tiny jar of powdered mint and natron. He won't need it, probably, but someone thought he should have it. Maybe him, maybe your aunt, maybe someone else who understood. Even in death, a man deserves a clean mouth, because in Egypt, death isn't an ending, it's a journey, and no one wants to greet Osiris with bad breath. As the body is carried toward the tomb, you follow quietly. The procession is long but solemn. A few children toss lotus petals ahead, others chant. At the tomb's entrance, a priest steps forward with a small toolkit. You recognize the items: a bronze pick, a reed spatula, a curved spoon. The opening of the mouth ceremony is about to begin. You stand still as the priest performs the rite. He touches the body's lips, then the teeth. He whispers something, too soft to catch. Then, using the spoon-shaped tool, he mimics the action of feeding. A symbolic bite, a sip, a word. This is no superstition. This is a final brushing, a last rinse before the soul continues. And it matters, because in the Book of the Dead, it's written, "May my mouth be opened. May I speak in the presence of the gods. May I eat bread, drink beer, and breathe the breeze of the sacred fields." The priest finishes. He places the clay pot into the tomb. You see the mint, the powder, the stick, and you feel something ease in your chest. Later, back at home, your grandmother says, "He'll be fine now. His breath will carry him forward." It's a strange comfort, but it sticks with you. Here's today's fringe detail. In some elite tombs, archaeologists have discovered entire mouthcare kits, including bronze instruments, powders, chew sticks, and even instructions, etched into the walls or written on scrolls. Not just symbolic, functional. These were people who believed the next world required everything this one did, including clean teeth. Scholars still argue whether these kits were ever used in the afterlife, or if they were more like protective charms, but no one doubts their significance. Egyptians planned for eternity with the same attention to detail they gave to daily life. And oral hygiene, that was daily life. You lie down that night under your linen blanket, chew stick cleaned and drying beside you. You think of your uncle, of his lopsided grin, of the way he'd whistle through his teeth when annoyed, of how his funeral was full of people who remembered his voice, and you hope, truly, that his voice carries on, clean, clear, and unbroken. You run your tongue along your molars. They're not perfect. One's chipped, another's sore, but they're yours, and you'll care for them as he did, not for vanity, not for the gods, but for the stories they still have left to tell. The days pass, slower now, softer. Grief has its own rhythm, and in Egypt it comes braided with rituals, meals offered to the dead, incense burned at dusk, names whispered in the silence so they don't slip away. You find yourself more careful with everything, especially your brushing. You use your chew stick with precision, almost reverence, like the act of cleaning your teeth might tether you more firmly to the living. One morning, while tending the family's herb plot, you discover a small patch of sweet basil, blooming early thanks to the flood waters. You pluck a few sprigs and crush them between your fingers. The scent is green, sharp, and hopeful. You decide to try something new, a basil rinse mixed with crushed fig and a splash of warm water. It stings, but in a cleansing way, not a punishing one. You begin to experiment more, not wildly, just gently. One day, a touch of lemon peel in the rinse. Another, a pinch of dateseed ash. Each variation is a question. What works for me? What soothes? What strengthens? You realize you've become what your grandfather once was, a quiet innovator, a home herbalist, a small scientist of the mouth, and you're not alone. All across your village, people are doing the same. Tinkering, sharing, testing. That young weaver near the palm grove now swears by rosewater and barley powder. The stonemason across the square uses aloe sap and vinegar, his breath perpetually sour but strangely effective. No one claims to have the final answer. That's not how this works. The beauty of Egyptian dental care was never in its certainty. It was in its adaptation. It grew as you grew, changed with your needs. A living tradition, not a fixed prescription. And here's today's curious find. While helping your cousin clean out a storage basket, you come across a small roll of linen tied with faded ribbon. Inside, carefully wrapped, is a journal of recipes, not for food but for mouth care. Dozens of them, all handwritten, all tested, all annotated. You flip through the entries. Too sharp. Added honey the second time? Better. Used on festival day. My gums bled, but breath was sweet. Keep this one, grandmother approved. Each page is a snapshot of someone caring, for themselves, for their family, for the sacred act of tending what's often unseen. You ask your grandmother where it came from. She smiles and says, "That was your uncle's." You stop, then sit, then start from the beginning. The journal becomes a companion. You try one recipe per week. Some work, some don't. One makes your lips tingle for a full day. Another turns your rinse water black. But each one teaches you something, not just about herbs or pain, but about commitment. Because brushing your teeth in ancient Egypt isn't a chore. It's a choice you make every morning to face the world with clarity. And in a place where words have weight, where breath carries truth, that choice is everything. One evening, you catch your younger cousin watching you brush. You hand her your chew stick and show her how to soften the end. She copies you, carefully. You brush together, side by side. She giggles when her paste dribbles down her chin. You smile and gently wipe it clean. That night, you write your own entry in the journal. Taught my cousin today. Basil and mint blend. She smiled the whole time, keeping this one. The tradition continues. You lie back under the stars, chew stick cleaned and tucked in its spot, your gums tingling with basil and memory. You close your eyes and think of your uncle's voice, your grandmother's prayers, your own breath, warm, clean, steady. This is your legacy now, not just clean teeth, but care, thought, practice. You drift into sleep with the words still fresh in your mind. Let my mouth be opened. Let my words be true. Let my breath carry me forward. This morning, your grandfather calls you over with a rare tone in his voice. Excitement. He's been working on something quietly for weeks. An idea, a theory, maybe even a revolution. And today, he's ready to share it. He opens a small clay jar. Inside is a soft grey paste that smells like mint, ashes, and something faintly metallic. He beams. I've balanced it, he says, holding it out to you. Not too sharp, not too sweet. Try. You dip a finger in, smear it across your molars, and start brushing with your chew stick. The texture is smooth, the flavour clean. A hint of eucalyptus, maybe. You spit and nod. That's actually good, he laughs. Took me 15 tries. Then growing more serious, he adds, I want you to write it down. In the book, he means the mouth care journal. Your uncle's now yours. You sit together and ink the entry carefully. Recipe number 72, grandfather's balance blend. Crushed myrrh, powdered oyster shell, boiled basil leaf water, 2 drops copper salt, pinch of natron. You underline it, a keeper. But it's not just the recipe that matters. It's what it represents, the continuity of care. Knowledge passed from hand to hand, mouth to mouth. And not through scholars in ivory towers, but through families hunched over firelight, whispering how to stop the sting in your gums before it becomes something worse. Later that afternoon, you find yourself visiting the old temple grounds, not for ceremony, but for curiosity. The priests are gone for now, and only a few workers remain, sweeping sand from carved thresholds. You sneak into the side courtyard, where medical texts used to be read aloud to initiates. You remember hearing a passage once. You don't know where it came from, or which papyrus held it, but it echoes in your head. To care for the teeth is to guard the gate. To guard the gate is to protect the truth. You whisper it now, running a hand over a faded carving of the god Thoth, tongue extended, as if caught mid-word. It wasn't just about hygiene, it was about speech. The Egyptians knew words could shape the world, bind contracts, summon gods. And where did those words come from? The mouth. So of course they cared for it with the same devotion they gave to scrolls, to sacred oils, to the geometry of pyramids. Here's your historical footnote. One temple manual included a section on ritual preparations before reciting sacred names. It recommended brushing with cedar oil and natron, rinsing with beer boiled with clove, burning incense and letting the smoke enter the mouth. Some scholars think this was literal. Others believe it was symbolic, cleansing the vessel of the word. Either way, it's unmistakable. The act of cleaning the mouth was a prerequisite for power. Back home, you try the cedar oil rinse for yourself. It tastes like burnt tree bark and regrets, but it leaves your tongue feeling oddly light, clear. You sit with that sensation, and it settles into something close to peace. That evening, the younger children gather near the fire for stories. Your grandmother begins one of the oldest ones, the tale of a lion with rotting teeth who couldn't roar until he chewed on the roots of a sacred fig tree. The story ends, of course, with him reclaiming his voice and his kingdom. The lesson isn't subtle, but it doesn't need to be. Before sleep, you update the journal again. This time not with a recipe, just a thought. Today I learned that a clean mouth isn't about perfection. It's about respect for myself, for my voice, for those who listen. You brush quietly. No rush, no pressure, just presence. Then you lie back, chew stick beside you, stars overhead, and you wonder, if someone finds this book one day, what will they think? Will they see superstition, ritual, or will they recognize something timeless? A person caring, a person learning, a person preparing to speak with clarity, one quiet night at a time. The last morning arrives with little fanfare, just the usual. Sunrise slicing through the palm trees, the smell of wet clay and warming herbs, and the soft clatter of someone grinding flour 2 houses over. Your eyes blink open, slow and steady. And as always, your first instinct is to reach for your chew stick. It's waiting for you, perfectly trimmed, its frayed end already dry and eager for use. You run your thumb along the familiar grooves where your teeth have worn it smooth. This stick has travelled with you for weeks, through feasts, funerals, laughter and pain. It's more than a tool, it's a witness. You brush slowly, thinking not about technique or freshness, but about continuity. How this ritual, so small and private, connects you to thousands before you. Every person who ever scraped a tooth with bark, every priest who ever whispered a spell over a bleeding gum, every grandmother who ever scolded a child for skipping their rinse. You spit into the sand, watching the foam disappear into the soil, and feel, strangely, grateful. Later that day, you take a walk to the edge of the village where the old tombs sleep under the sand. You don't go inside. You just sit on a sun-warmed rock nearby, journal in hand, and think about what you've learned, about what you've inherited, about what you'll leave behind. You flip through the journal's pages, your uncle's handwriting in the first half, yours in the second. Some recipes worked, others didn't. One made your cousin's lips go numb for 3 days, but all of them mattered, because each entry wasn't just a formula, it was a gesture of care. You tear a scrap from the back page and begin to write, "Let this be known. We brushed not to be perfect, but to be present. We rinsed not for beauty, but for clarity. And when our mouths were clean, our words became the kind the gods might hear." You fold it, place it gently into a small hollow in the stone, and cover it with a pebble. Nothing grand, just a mark that you were here, that you brushed, that you remembered. As the sun lowers, you return home, share a final rinse of basil and myrrh with your grandmother, and help your youngest cousin tie her miswack stick with a ribbon. She wants it to look fancy, like the pharaohs probably had. You nod. You let her believe it. Maybe they did. That night, you eat simply. Barley, a little fig, a cup of sweet beer. Nothing too sticky. You brush before bed, just like always, then tuck the chew stick away in its reed wrapper. Your cousin asks you what the gods do when they hear someone lie. You say, "Depends," but it's harder if your mouth's clean. They notice faster. She nods, like that makes perfect sense. And then, just before sleep, you whisper one final line into the dark. "Let my words be clear. Let my breath be light. Let my story begin." Now take a breath. Let your jaw unclench. Feel the back of your tongue relax in your mouth. Let your lips soften and part just slightly. There's nothing left to say tonight. You've chewed through the stories, swished the past between your thoughts, and spit out the distractions. You're lying on warm earth now, in your mind, with stars above and the sound of a river in the distance, a river older than empires. Its water has rinsed kings, farmers, scribes, and dreamers. You are one among them, not royalty, not legend, but part of something ancient and unbroken. You've seen what a mouth can hold. Pain, laughter, spells, songs. You've tasted honey and ash. You've whispered to the gods through cedar and mint. And through it all, you've come to understand that brushing your teeth in ancient Egypt was never just about hygiene. It was about hope. Hope that you might greet each day with a clean beginning. Hope that your words might land softly on a friend's ear. Hope that when your time comes, you'll be able to speak your name clearly into the stars. So breathe now, in through your nose, slow and warm, out through your mouth, soft and easy. Let your tongue settle. Let your mind drift. There's nothing more you need to do. You've taken care. You've remembered. You've arrived. Sleep well now. You've brushed like an Egyptian.